everyone. Welcome back to the Winter Solstice Gathering, and it is the Winter Solstice today. I think a little bit later here on the West Coast. I'm Renee Baribeau, and known as the Practical Shaman, though you'll hear me always say it's kind of redundant because all shamanism is practical. And I'm here with John Lockley, and he's going to be talking about befriending chaos in the winds of change. And he's a Sounds True author, public speaker, traditional African shaman from Sangoma. He leads retreat and he does private sessions worldwide. He's the author of Leopard Warrior and the Way of the Leopard. And if you're registered over at the iamsymposium.com, you'll get access to his free gifts. And we're going to share this video widely. And let's see, do I have anything? Let's see. Well, I love that he always loves that about the wind, and he always brings in the wind. And the other night last night when I was lighting the fire, John, it went up so fast and it burned so hot. All I could think of is, I wonder what John would say about this. And then I was thinking, and it wasn't moving it wasn't shifting in a direction or anything. It was just going straight up, hot as can be. And I thought, like, wow, people are going to be bringing a lot of crap to the fire this year to be putting in here for a little transmutation. And sure enough, the first stuff that had to go into was my expectations of how everything was going to go, and how the Zoom was going to work with Facebook and all of that. And throughout the day, I kept seeing ones, and I understood that yes, transformation meant that we can't hold on to any ideas, that any of our ideas that we're holding on to too tight could really disappoint us, cause resentments, and really let us down. So it's best to befriend this time of chaos. And so I'm really excited you're here, and I'm going to let you take it away.
Thanks, Renee.
And the cat is here. She likes you.
So it's really good to be here, and it's nice to be here on this special gathering at Solstice, and where the light is going to start coming back in to our lives, the physical light and the spiritual light. I mean, nowadays we're living in such tough times, and I never would have thought that we would have experienced a war like we have right now in Gaza and also in Ukraine. My background is that I was brought up with three civil wars. When I was born in the 70s in South Africa, there was 3 wars going on. So the first was the civil war in South Africa, known as apartheid, and there was I'm sure a lot of people are aware of it, but it was one of the worst forms of social engineering in the world in terms of pushing black people down and having this white minority rule. And then there was the civil unrest around all of that. So that's what I was born into. And then my mom is from Ireland, and at the time there was a lot of bombing and so on happening in Northern Ireland in Belfast. So there was a civil war happening there. And then the third war was actually in Zimbabwe, and in those days was known as Rhodesia. And that's where my father is from. So I was born into this space of war and social unrest, and it was something that we spoke about at home. And I used to hear my mom on the phone to Ireland talking about what's happening, and then I'd also hear from my father and my uncle, who was a military officer in the war in Rhodesia. And so as I was growing up, all I wanted to do was find peace, because as I walked in the streets of South Africa, I could see the military vehicles and the police, and I could see this terrible injustice of black folks being pushed down and mistreated. So as I grew up, all I wanted to do was find some kind of peace and harmony. And so I really searched for that like water. So nowadays, how can we find peace and harmony within ourselves when we are being confronted by this terrible war, or rather wars in Gaza and Ukraine that is affecting everyone, and also the hidden or silent war which is the war against animals and terrible poaching and environmental degradation. How can we find our own peace, and then how can we do something about bringing peace into the world? So this is what I want to speak today about, how to befriend our own chaos and also see how your own chaos can slip over into the wider society and how one person can make a huge difference. So before we start, I just want to do a little bit of a meditation, and then I'm going to be talking more deeply about war and about chaos and bring in some stories from our own life and stories of Nelson Mandela, and then come back into how does it help you, the listener, to find your own peace, and what can you do to bring about world peace? Because we say in South Africa that each human being can make a difference to the wider world of humanity and also to the wider world of the environment and the ecosystem. And the reason is because we are like a beehive. The human beings are all connected. All mystery schools and all spiritual teachings will say how each human being is connected. So Carl Jung would also speak about that in terms of the collective unconscious. And so as one bee in the hive starts to change, all the bees change. So the same is with us as human beings. As we can make peace with our own chaos and our own shadows, and make peace with the chaos of being alive on planet Earth right now, then that peace can filter out to the human race and also the environment. So what I'd like to do now is just do a guided meditation and bring in my drum and call in our ancestors. Because right now, when we are experiencing chaos and disruption and war, the ancients, in particular my experience of being a South African sangoma, a traditional shaman, as sangomas we always welcome in our ancestors, and because our ancestors are the custodians of our humanity. We are the custodians of planet Earth, and our ancestors hold the wisdom of the human race. Yes, some ancestors may be not as enlightened as others, but when we are welcoming in ancestors, we are welcoming in our wisdom keepers, the wisdom keepers of humanity. So we are calling on those enlightened beings and those ones who can guide us. So that's what we mean in Africa when we talk about ancestors. So today I'm going to, in the guided meditation, welcome in our ancestors, and I invite you to welcome your ancestors in as well. And as we make peace with our ancestors and where we come from, that's the first step to befriending our shadows and also to befriend the chaos of being alive on planet Earth right now. Okay, so taking a moment just to close your eyes. And let go, and put your hand on your heart, and just feel your heartbeat. Know that you are a child of nature, and all children are equal. If a sparrow can make peace with the weather outside, whether it is plus 40 degrees Celsius in the Kalahari Desert or minus 40 degrees Celsius in Canada, if a sparrow can make peace with the winds of change and with the weather, then so can you, and so can I, and so can all of us. So how can we learn from the sparrows and from the animals? Breathe in and let go. Don't hold any expectations of right and wrong. Be true to yourself. Be true to your own heartbeat. So feel your own heartbeat and let go into it. As you feel your heartbeat, I want you to have a sense of watching your own heartbeat and standing behind it. So you following your own heartbeat, following it, as opposed to rushing in front and trying to change things and so on. So feeling your heartbeat, connecting with it, and allowing your heartbeat to move in front of you. Closing your eyes, breathing in deeply. So breathing in deeply, connecting with your heart. Welcoming in your ancestors. Welcome in your ancestors from your mother's side with grace and dignity, and welcome in your ancestors from your father's side with grace and dignity. Welcome in any adopted ancestors from birth or from marriage or from ceremony like Buddhist or shamanic or yogic, any spiritual ancestors or connections. Welcome them in. Feel your heartbeat, feel your bones. We welcome in our ancestors from all the four corners of the world, of earth, and we ask our wisdom keepers to come and be with us. Teach us the old ways of Ubuntu Ubunzulu, the old ways of humanity. Help us to find inner peace. Help us to navigate the winds of change. When war comes, how do we respond? Help us to make peace with our own shadows, with the dirt and grime of living on planet Earth right now. Help us to be like the lotus flower. The lotus flower feeds off the mud, and when the time is right, it blossoms. Help us to be like the lotus flower, great ones. So right now, feel your own pain or your own joy in your heart and feel the prayer of welcoming in the light. What does it mean to welcome in the light for you? Feel that, and also feel your intentions for the coming new year. Feel that. Breathe into that. What are you searching for? Are you searching for more abundance of health, more abundance spiritually, good dreams, more connection with your spirits, with your ancestors? Are you searching for more abundance, maybe financially, to help you survive and provide for your families? So just be aware of what is it that you are searching for, and then make space for that in your heart as you're breathing, as we holding this meditation together. And then I'm going to bring in the drum. And when I bring in the drum is to bring in the lightning energy and bring in the thunder. Because we know in Africa that the thunder and the lightning is scary and it's dangerous, but it brings the weather and it brings the rain and it brings fertility, and that in itself brings transformation. So the thunder of the drum is to ignite your heart, to give you inspiration, give you energy, give you hope, and know that you are not alone. There's billions of ancestors before us, and there's going to be billions in front of us as we pass. So as we connect with our hearts through the drum, all our hearts are connected, and that's when we welcome in the wisdom keepers of the human race. We welcome in our own ancestors, and we welcome in our own connection to the earth, to the mud and soil beneath our feet. Sometimes that mud and soil is very fertile, and sometimes it's toxic, and we have to learn to detox it. And we detox the mud through prayer and through mindfulness, through doing what we're doing right now. Okay, so I'm bringing in my drum now. It's called an isigubo. It's a sangoma drum from South Africa, part of my lineage as a sangoma. For those of you who don't know sangomas, we are traditional African shamans from Southern Africa. And the word sangoma means people of the song, because as we sing and dance, and as we drum, we bring in the spirits, we bring in our ancestors. Okay, so just feeling your own breath and feeling your own connection to your ancestors, and breathe into that. So here we go. Ye abazali bammo bammo yabazali bammo bammo ye abazali bammo bammo. I welcome in my ancestors. Wamkela kila manyange, wamkela kila utiko, wamkela kila banabadala. I welcome in the great spirit utiko, kamata. Welcome in my ancestors down my mother's side and my father's side. I welcome in the ancestors and wisdom keepers of my lineage. The lineage of Ngwevu, the lineage of Sugwini, the lineage of my teacher Mangwevu. Yeah, Yabazali Bamo, Bamo, Yabazali Bamo, Bamo. Abazali bammo, bammo, abazali bammo, bammo, ye abazali bam, ye abazali bam. Vulen lela mnyange, he, vulen lela mnyange, vulen lela mnyange, he, vulen lela mnyange, he mnyange, he mnyange, he mnyange. Abazali bammo, bammo, abazali bammo, bammo, abazali bammo, bammo, abazali bammo, bammo, hey abazali bam, hey abazali bam. Vulen lela mnyange, hey, vulen lela mnyange, vulen lela mnyange, hey, vulen lela mnyange, hey mnyange, mnyange, hey mnyange, mnyange. Lela mnyange, he, vulen lela mnyange, vulen lela mnyange, he, vulen lela mnyange, he mnyange, mnyange, he mnyange, mnyange. Tamagwini mnyange, he, tamagwini mnyange, tamagwini mnyange, he, tamagwini mnyange, he mnyange, mnyange, he mnyange, mnyange. He mnyange, mnyange, he mnyange, mnyange, he mnyange, mnyange, he mnyange, mnyange, he
Ngi. Hey, abazali bamo, bamo, yabazali bamo, bamo, yabazali bamo, bamo, hey, bamo, hey, abazali bam, hey, abazali bam. Vulindlela abana badala camagu, vulindlela nkulunkulu camagu, vulindlela abantu abadala camagu. So it's feeling your heart, feeling that space inside of you. It's dropping into that, feeling your intention for the new year, your intention for bringing in the light, the literal light of the sun. We welcome it in, and we also welcome in that spiritual light. We call on it ourselves. So as you call on the light, something starts to happen. As you call on the light, you call on the light not just for yourself, but also for your community and for your ancestors and for nature. So even just lighting a white candle and doing some prayers, it makes a difference. So what does it mean to embrace chaos? It means to embrace your own shadow, your negative feelings, your positive feelings, your grumpiness, all of that, embrace that, and then do something about it. Okay, do something about that shadow energy. Maybe if it's been a bit too disruptive inside of you, then make a change. And on that note, I want to just share a little story about Nelson Mandela. For those of you, I'm sure most people know of Nelson Mandela, but he was the champion of South Africa in terms of bringing end to apartheid and bringing end to civil war and bringing peace in South Africa. And he is also one of our first democratic presidents in South Africa. So he was incarcerated for 27 years in prison, and one day he had this incredible epiphany and experience. And this led him to becoming a world leader in terms of a humanitarian and a very compassionate leader. So what happened to him was he was in jail, and one day he was in his little cubicle, and he felt all this anger towards injustice, anger towards white people, anger towards his situation. And there was this little voice inside of him, like the little sparrow inside of him. The little voice said to him, "Be aware of your anger, Nelson, because it can kill you. Your anger can kill you." So then he went to sleep, and then when he woke up, he remembered that little voice, and then the next thing, that little voice inside of him said, "You need to befriend the enemy. You need to befriend the enemy." And then his jailer opened the door, and there was this young white guy who was the jailer, and the enemy was very clearly white people at that time. And so he just said to the guy, "What made you become a jailer? How does someone become a jailer, And then this young white guy started sharing a little bit of his story, and he said, "Well, my mother needed my help, and my father died when I was very young. He died when I was, I think the guy said 14 years old. And I've got a lot of brothers and sisters, and I was the eldest, or I am the eldest, and I had to help my mother support the rest of our family. So I had to go and get a job." And in that moment, Nelson Mandela said it was the first time he had heard how white people didn't have privilege. And he recognized that he had had more privilege than this young white guy, because he also had a father who died when he was very young, but then he was welcomed in to the home of the prince of the Xhosa nation. So he was brought up with a lot of means, and he was able to go to a private school and go to university and things like that. So suddenly inside of him, there was this compassion starting to flower inside of him. And he started listening a little bit more deeply to this young white guy, this jailer. So then he said, "Okay, well, what part of the country are you from?" And the guy said, I'm from the Eastern Cape. And he said, I'm also from the Eastern Cape. And then he started talking to him in Xhosa. He said, Uyasazi isiXhosa. And the young guy said, Ewe, nam ndiyasazi isiXhosa. He said, do you speak Xhosa language? And the young jailer said, yes, I do. And then the next thing, they started speaking Xhosa together, which is a very difficult language. And Nelson Mandela encouraged this young white jailer to go back to school and finish his schooling. And when Mandela became the president of South Africa, right next to him was this young white jailer who'd become a close friend of his. So I suppose the story there is about showing how what we perceive as real is not always the case. And we have to look at a situation with the eyes of compassion and the eyes of discernment. And sometimes we have to also face our own begrudgery, and our own malice and our own anger, and ask ourselves the question, is this true, this situation? And what can I do to change it? So often it means we need to listen a little bit more deeply. And I find working with animals very helpful because animals teach us how to listen. So the story I mentioned in the beginning about the sparrows, I've been amazed at seeing how sparrows and other animals can survive very harsh weather conditions. So the first would be in the Kalahari Desert in Botswana, when the temperature can go easily over 40 degrees Celsius and 50 degrees Celsius, so extremely hot. And I've always been fascinated to watch and see how the animals survive in these harsh temperatures. And then working and living in the northern Canadian wilderness, I've been amazed to also see sparrows survive and other animals when it's minus 40 and minus 45 degrees Celsius and extremely cold. And what the animals do, what I noticed with the sparrows, there's this inner knowing that comes through, and there's the stillness, and there's that sense of really listening to the world around them. So that's what birds teach us. They listen to the world around them. So what does it mean for us to listen, not just with our ears, but with our whole being, with our whole body? What does it mean? To listen also means to not be too quick with action, but to open up the seed of discernment in our third eye and to allow our intuition to speak through our spines and through our bodies. I remember another story of Nelson Mandela, and this is a story that's come up for me repeatedly over the last few months, because Nelson Mandela was interviewed, must have been about 20 years ago. He was interviewed by the presidents of the Israeli Youth League and the president of the Palestinian Youth League, and they have a meeting together. And they said to Mandela, they said, Mr. Mandela, how did you do it? How did you bring peace to South Africa? And he said, well, it was a bit like this. Every day, me and F.W. de Klerk, who was the leader of the Afrikaans Nationalist Party at the time, he said every day we would meet up, we would shake hands, he would ask me how I was, I'd ask him how he was, we would have some coffee, and then we would discuss politics and how we can bring peace to South Africa. And during that time we would fight and we would argue and we'd each have big differences, and at the end of the day we would shake hands again and we would say goodbye. And these two young people, the head of the Palestinian Youth League and the head of the Israeli Youth League, they said, so how did you do it? Didn't you ever get really angry and you feel that's it? You're not going to meet up anymore? And he said, no, because too much was resting on the meeting that we had together. People's lives were resting on the fact that me and F.W. de Klerk would make peace and come up with a good resolution. So it didn't matter about our personalities, and it didn't matter about our own right and wrong, and whether we felt that we were being justified and heard in the discussion, we had to think about other South Africans and what they were going through, and we had to put our differences aside and then come back the next day and renegotiate and discuss again, because there was too much riding on the importance of us finding peace, because war was not an answer for us. And so this is what happened back and forth. They'd have these arguments, and then they'd come back together, and then they would make peace and shake hands. And it's a bit like that if you look at martial arts and you look at karate. Before they start, they bow to each other, and then there's combat, and they fight and spar, and at the end, you bow to your opponent. So on that last note, I just want to say it's very important that we find respect for ourselves. When we're feeling chaos and we're feeling the shadow, respect that, because it's teaching you something. And when you get into conflict with another human being or with an animal, any being, first feel that conflict but respect them. It's like when you're working with wild animals, the cardinal rule is you need to respect the animal. So respect your opponent, whether you like them or not, whether you're your friend or not, whether they're your enemy or not. Respect your opponent. And as we do that, then we can find a way to befriend the chaos and disruption and war that we see all around us. So thank you so much.
Beautiful. And your drumming is such a very, very nice, very moving. I so agree with what you're saying. When I decided that it was really time to come back to my own community, and people would think, oh, you're going to start to organize things in your neighborhood. Yeah, I joined the board, and I'm head of the beach committee. And we think that that we have to be doing one thing as opposed to making sure the beach committee, we own our water utility, that our water is safe for the, next 7 generations or such. So, and there's a lot of people on these boards and in your workplaces. One of my contractors, we just don't talk politics. And my friend says, well, I don't know if I can have him work for me. And they're like, well, if you could just change that you want this cabinet built in your garage and think about what you have in common, the cabinet, instead of where you're different, life starts to change. And I think we have to do a whole lot more of that in the coming days, because the truth is when the wind blows, and the wind blows down a building in your town or blows down the whole town, are you really going to stop and ask people, do we agree about this? Or are you going to get together and sweep up the mess like that they've done in places around the world in this last few years? So your message is profound and timely, John. And I would like to say, John's also an author. And one of the biggest gifts you can give to an author is to buy their books. And I went and looked, I'm like, okay, is Winds of Spirit, with all these 1,000, 1,200, 1,300 people, 1,400 people here, Winds of Spirit should be trending at the top of the Amazon sales today, as should your book and, Marsha's book. And so one way you can be in community with us is to go over and get our books, right?
Yeah. And it's called Leopard Warrior. That's what it's called, Leopard Warrior.
And there's actually, if you've registered for the conference over at the imsymposium.com, there's links to his books. There's links to his gift. What is your gift?
It's a guided meditation when they sign up for my newsletter.
And you all heard the power of his drum and the soothing quality of his voice. So make sure you skedaddle right on over there and sign up and download that, because everybody who's showing up for you is doing this from the gracious heart that they carry. And so, ask, how am I befriending the chaos? What is that shadow side of me that likes to take? How do I give back here? What is the give back? And I'm sure we'll all appreciate it when you click on our gifts, buy our books, and buy our wind whistles. Yeah. And I was wondering, do you ever play with your wind whistle that I sent you?
Yes. Yes, I suppose always you end up using this one
I
because
know.
this is, I'm just so used to it, I've been playing it for years,
I know. You're used to your bone. That's okay. But I was always, I thought, oh, I wonder if he ever plays his wind whistle.
Yeah, I've got it in my office.
Cool. And all of that. And we will see you back soon. Up next is Louise Eddington. And we have two astrologers, and they come from very different kind of perspectives. So up next is Louise Eddington. And stay with us because we are full pack till 8 o'clock tonight. So we're starting on the hour, every hour. We still have Evelyn Rysdak. We have Deborah Koff-Chapin doing a live touch drawing at noon that I'm going to intuit what she's drawing for the message for our solstice gathering. My assistant, Erica Hernandez, is going to be presenting, and she has a lot of wisdom. Jorge Luis Delgado from Peru. We have our friend Eastock Barry coming, Christina Lee Pratt. I mean, this day is packed full, so make sure you stay with us and keep tending to your fires, keep those candles lit, and we will see you all on the hour.